Welcome to CMAC 207, a place where prisoners can be heard and help build more compassion for those that are reformed while incarcerated. Some of the stories, thoughts, and opinions may not be suitable for sensitive listeners. Listener discretion is advised. As always, thank you for engaging.
Hello, this is a free call from. Hello, this is a free call from. An incarcerated individual at Fremont Correctional Facility. This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept this free call, press 1. To refuse this free call, thank you for using Securus. You may start the conversation now.
Joey Bear. So we are recording, and
All right.
today we're gonna discuss. Let me turn you down a little bit. We're gonna discuss my marriage, me being a prison wife, my marriage and divorce. Well, my ex-husband was incarcerated, and just as our disclaimer. Everything I say is alleged. We're not going to talk mean about my ex-husband because we don't want to get sued. And that is everyone's warning to not marry the jailhouse lawyer because they will get you. Allegedly. And Joey's going to interview me. So you go ahead whenever you're ready. Fire away.
All right. So I guess my first question is going to be, like, throughout prison marriage, can you explain to people how tough it really is, like, to love somebody that's actually incarcerated?
I think the separation is hard, but also I think it takes a certain person to be in a prison relationship in the first place. I've always been very independent. I've been okay on my own. I've been alone and single a lot. And I have, history of relationship after relationship being really toxic and not working out. So when I met my ex-husband, I was in a place where I probably was afraid to be in a more intimate, closer relationship. And so that prison aspect where we weren't together every day, there was distance between us, worked for me. But at the same time, it was a lot to cope with because you are separated and you don't truly know that person for a very, very long time. So my ex and I were together for 2 years before we even got married. And then our marriage within a year had fallen apart because there was colors that weren't shown on both sides until we got married. And I also think there's an expectation of what marriage looks like. And when you're in a prison relationship, the expectations of a relationship or a marriage aren't going to necessarily apply because it's such a different construct of relationship compared to when you're in society. We have Eli joining us, our co-host, our little kitty co-host. I apologize that he's talking in the background. So, there's, like, in a very traditional marriage or relationship, a lot of people choose monogamy. In a prison relationship, when you're not having sexual relations with that person, monogamy may not work, and many people choose to open their relationship, and some people choose to do monogamy, and and they do it very different ways. But I think when you're in a prison relationship, it's so hard that it does not look like the same relationship that you would have in society. And for some people it's hard to understand, for some people it's hard to do because society has told us what a relationship is and what it's supposed to look like. And if you try to take society's construct of marriage and apply it to a prison relationship, it probably will not work.
So my question then becomes, your ex-husband, did you meet him in prison while he was incarcerated, or had you known him before?
So I was a met well in, and that is like a term that goes around online and people use it. Some people have met before or were with their spouse before they were incarcerated. I did not. I met my ex-husband through a pen pal site. It's very similar with how I met Joey. I wrote a letter, he wrote back, and our friendship picked up from there. And there is some debate on whether or not met well in relationships are real relationships. Like, are they real? Because you didn't really know them out in society. I argue that the emotional bond and the friendship that you're building through communication is very real. It's very real. It can be very romantic. It can be very loving, like with our case where we have a very loving friendship. Like those, just because you met somebody while they're in prison doesn't mean that the relationship doesn't hold any weight. And I think relationships look a lot of different ways, and we shouldn't judge each other on whether or not a relationship is real or going to last, just because somebody met well in or met while they were out. But I did meet my ex while he was in.
So for those listeners that are listening that may have been married before, or those that get married after they meet him in incarcerated, which one do you think is actually easier and harder?
I think a met well in relationship is by far easier. I say that because of this, and like, okay, here's my psychology degree coming out. If you have a husband, let's say, and he was out and you had a very, stereotypical American marriage, the sanctity of marriage, and then he gets incarcerated, there is a grief that you go through grieving what you had and the way your relationship was and losing that person that I didn't have to experience. And there's also this huge adjustment of going from we had our marriage outside and now we're trying to navigate this huge change of being in a prison relationship. And is it fulfilling? Is it meeting my needs? How do we make it work? How do we save that bond that we had that's now missing physical touch and romance and all this stuff? Like, and so I feel like they're navigating a lot more and the grief is heavier. Where I met my ex while he was in, and it was no different than meeting you. Like, you've always been in prison the whole time I've met you. You know,
Thanks.
so
that makes me feel good.
Well, no, but like, so I didn't. It wasn't like, oh, Joey Bear can't come over and hang out on the deck anymore. Like, I didn't grieve that. Like, as far as I know, this is how it's always been, and you're well adjusted to it, and I didn't lose anything. This is how it's always been, and so I think because it's always been this way, I'm better adjusted because I don't experience that loss. It's kind of like you don't know what you've lost if you don't know. Like, it's almost like ignorance is bliss in that case, because when you met well in, they've always been in prison.
Are we really going to the 80s references? You don't know what you got till it's gone.
I feel like you were a little flat on that, Joey. You can do better.
I'm just saying, so for being a prison wife and everything, like, do you feel the burden of when you say go visit your ex-husband or at that time your husband? Do you feel a certain way, like how the correctional officers treat you? Do they treat you any less because you're a wife of a prisoner, or do they treat you with more respect and dignity? And what's it like that first time you walk into that visiting room and you see your husband?
I think one of the first things that was a shock to me was, even though I'm a working professional and I'm respected in my career and I know a lot about mental health and usually I'm treated with a lot of respect, I all of a sudden was being treated like I was no better than the person that was in prison. And so there was kind of this, because I was associated with a resident, that, you know, that I was no better than them. And I actually wrote a pretty heated email to the warden that I was not going to be treated like that. And they wrote back and they're like, no, like, we're not treating you any differently. Like, this is just how it is. And like, but it really did feel like at the time that I wrote that letter that I was being treated like I was incarcerated. And to have never been treated that way and to never have been done anything like against the law and be a law-abiding citizen, to be treated so lowly because I was associated with someone didn't really make sense to me. However, I do have to like put in the fact that I live in Maine. We do not have a lot of population. I think our population is like 1.5 million. It's not a lot. We're big state, small population. We have like 4 prisons in our whole state. Like, and it's broken down to like, if you're sick and elderly, you go here. If you're a woman, you go here. If you're serving less than 10 years, you go here. If you're serving more than 10 years, you go here. And that is how our prison system is broken down. And our prison system, I'm proud of them. They're very progressive. They're doing things that other states aren't. They are piloting things so other prisons can pick them up and see that they've worked and that Maine's already done it. Maine was one of the first states to change the language. So overall, our prison system treats you very kind. The guards are very nice. There were people that that we'd make jokes. We'd say good morning. When I walked in, it was always the same guard. People would be like, good morning, and know him by name. He would know people by name. And it definitely has that small town Maine vibe at our prison, which you're not going to get in very many states. That's not how it is. And I've learned that from like going to Texas and going to Colorado to see you, that welcoming vibe is just something that is like happening in Maine. So like, go Maine. So I didn't feel like I was looked down upon a lot, but I did feel that like there was a little less respect for me because I was there seeing an inmate. But having said that, I do think the guards do a wonderful job of really making people feel welcomed and comfortable, and they're trying to do their job of keeping, drugs and weapons out of the prison system, but also treating us with a lot of kindness. And we're also very blessed. Like, one more thing, like, our prison systems also really welcome like ideas and suggestions. Like, I wrote to the commissioner and I was like, I don't want to be a visitor anymore. I want to be a guest because my loved one lives there. And technically I'm his guest when I arrive at the prison. And because they're rechanging the language, like I was like, yeah, you should change that too. And the commissioner actually wrote back and was like, that's a wonderful idea. And like, we're continuing to work on changing the language and updating things, blah, 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 blah. So our prison system is kind of very different and very progressive, and we can do things like contact our commissioner and have a nice little suggestion and a friendly thank you. And so it's a little different.
So let's talk about something, because you're talking about prison systems being archaic and everything, but one thing that isn't archaic is the way that a wife feels when she needs her husband and he's not there. And same thing for probably the husband that's incarcerated and everything when he needs his wife and he's not there. And so how hard is it in those times of need and holidays and things like that? And what's the advice you can give somebody that is married and has a loved one incarcerated?
It's very hard during holidays, birthdays. My ex-husband, and this happens, like, I mean, you even chose to acknowledge your birthday on a different day. Life happens and birthdays are hard and stuff. My ex-husband had allegedly ruined like every holiday and every birthday. So not only was it hard to not have him home and to not be with him or only be able to visit him for a couple of hours around those times, but emotionally, he also would be very struggling and acting out. And then also on top of that, I would be struggling because he was gone and we weren't together. And so those times can be really hard to navigate. I think it's important to have compassion during those times and understand that it's not you, it's not personal, it's the situation that maybe they are depressed that they're incarcerated and can't be home. Maybe they're angry that they're incarcerated and can't be home. Maybe they ignore the day because that makes it easier for them to deal with. Everyone reacts a little differently to these moments, and like trying to navigate what your loved one's going through can be really confusing. I think for that, it's getting your team together of like family members that understand and support you, friends that understand and support you. Not everyone's going to understand your prison relationship. Some people will and be like, whatever makes you happy, cool, like love you, want you to be happy. And other people are going to be like, absolutely not. I think this is crazy, and not be supportive. So find those people that are accepting of what you're doing and cling to them for support. Find that foundation that's going to lift you up during those times. And just set boundaries and take care of yourself, because those moments are going to be really hard. And when you need like your loved one and they're not there, it can be very, very hard. Like, I've definitely had days where I have cried for hours, talked to friends, talked to family, but really just needed my loved one, and I'm waiting for them to call. The other thing that I think is really hard is when you're used to a phone call or an email every day and they lock down, it's very scary. The first time I experienced a lockdown, I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, I came into the prison system and a prison relationship totally blind. I had no idea how it worked. I didn't know anything. And the first thing my ex told his friend was, I didn't tell Cecilia about lockdown. She's going to be so worried. And I was very worried for like 3 days until he called. And then he explained, like, sometimes we lock down, sometimes things happen, and we're in our cells and we don't have access to a phone. So the rule that I always have is wait 72 hours because a lockdown can last a long time. And then if you're really worried, call the operator at the prison and they will let you know.
And that is for just the state of Maine, for the listeners to understand. There are states that will lock down for a month and you won't hear from your loved one for a month.
Okay. And like, I don't even know if every state can call the prison, to be honest. I don't know if like anyone can call and do a wellness check on, I know in Maine we can, and they're very nice about it. They'll tell you we're locked down. It could be a while.
Okay. So my next question is, there are, like, throughout the holidays and everything, or throughout times period, I'll sit here and watch people that are married incarcerated, and they'll be talking to their wives, and they'll be so frustrated, and they'll be just, and it has nothing really to do with their wives. And maybe the same thing happens on the street, or the wife or the husband of the incarcerated one is frustrated and everything like that. And so there's a lot of stress that comes with like daily living in prison, and a lot of times people incarcerated will take it out on their wives, or the wife's not having their husband in, lockdown situation or anything like that may take out that stress against their husband. What is the best tool that somebody that's married could possibly keep within themselves and their psyche to understand and to be able to adapt to where these things don't become, just destructive?
Oh, that's such a hard question to answer because, during my marriage, like if I didn't answer a phone call, my ex-husband would be super upset and it would turn into like a fight. And for me, I just felt like it's unrealistic for me to answer every single call. Like I have to live my life. And that was definitely a conversation where I'm like, I feel like I'm tied to my phone. Like I feel a little trapped and like having to really talk that out with him. Now, of course, we obviously never fixed our issues because we did get divorced. We're still friendly now. He will call. I remember his birthday. I remember him at Christmas. We're very kind to one another. We're on our best behavior when we're talking about finance. That seems to be like we both love it, and that's something we can discuss without fighting. But trying to keep that...
From hindsight, now that you've been married and you see the things that he's done wrong and see the things that you've done wrong, do you think communication is the key here?
I do think communication is the key, but I also think sometimes you just have to know when to walk away. Like sometimes you get fixed up with somebody that just can't handle not having you there, and that becomes really toxic. And like sometimes you do have to cut these relationships loose because they're not working. And I do believe that has to be a conversation. Like I don't believe in just dropping somebody. And I've had a lot of pen pals, and a lot of them I let them drop me before, and I've had one where I was like, look, I think you're just in it for money and I can't be your pen pal anymore. But I do think there should be some closure and some conversation around it. But I think, like Sky and you are very well adjusted to the fact that I can't always answer my phone, and I've never had you be mad at me because I've missed a phone call. And sometimes I've answered and been like, I am too exhausted to talk. I need to go to bed. And even if I'm exhausted, I try to answer and like let you know if I'm not like completely unconscious. Sometimes you've definitely called and I am just out. But, that was something in hindsight that like my ex-husband really didn't understand. Like he wanted me to take the call. He wanted me to be there. And like, I felt like I'm only one person and I'm working 2 jobs and I'm trying to do all these things with my life for my well-being and take care of myself. And I can't take care of you and take care of me at the same time. That conversation was never heard. And I couldn't meet his needs that he had. And so, like, I had to end the relationship. But I think a healthy prison
You have 1 minute
relationship
left.
looks like where you're communicating and both people feel like their needs are getting met and both person can feel like they can live their lives and still share them together without there being like a lot of weight on what a relationship should look like. Do you want to call back? And I feel like we have so much more to go over, like the process and stuff. We might have to do a part two.
All right. I'll go ahead and call back real quick.
Okay.
I'm hanging up right now. 3, 2, 1.
The caller has hung up.
This is like kind of a hard interview because we didn't practice. This is all on the fly. And now I realize Joey's like under some pressure when I'm asking him questions about his incarceration off the fly with no preparation. He is very much like somebody that would prepare and like we would know questions ahead of time. I am very ADHD. I'm like, let's record. We got time right now. Let's do this. And we're doing it on the fly. So I feel like I'm in the hot seat. This is it's fun, but it's also like, and it's something I don't really talk about. You know, one of the things is when you marry a prisoner and you marry a murderer and you divorce them, you're not getting away from that. For the rest of my life, I have to be like, well, my second husband was a murderer, and then explain that choice to people that may or may not understand that you love who you love. And I did what I did. And, you know, my friends and family didn't try to talk me out of my marriage. I am definitely one of those people where if I tell you I'm going to do something, I do it. And I own what I say and I do what I do and I own the consequences that come with it. And with every choice, good or bad, there are consequences, good and bad. One of the wonderful things that my ex-husband taught me about was finance. So I am in a much better place financially for having met him and married him and learned about money and investing and all that stuff. But also, and learning boundaries. He's definitely somebody that taught me to set hard boundaries and to say no.
Hello, this is a free call from an incarcerated individual at Fremont Correctional Facility. This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept this free call, press 1. To refuse this free call, press thank you for using Securus. You may start the conversation now.
Joe, better. All right, we are back.
Okay. All right. So, incarcerated people, many of us have problems and substance problems or psychological problems and things like that. I like to think that I'm a rare breed that doesn't have these problems, but you know, I get sad, things like that, times and happy and all that stuff. But for an incarcerated person, when you were married, I don't know if your ex-husband had a substance problem or anything like that, but I've noticed that a constant issue with these relationships is usually the guy asking for money. And yes, people in prison do need money. I encourage you to send your loved ones money. For the simple fact, you know, ties and things like that aren't cheap. And when you make $20 a month, that's just not a feasible thing to do. But usually, most of us that don't have substance problems will sit there and acquire some sort of hustle and make at least a living. And so those times that we do get money are very appreciated and everything like that. But money seems to be a stress factor in many relations in prison. So whether or not your ex had a substance abuse problem, can you explain how stressful a money situation was?
Yeah. So, and all of this is alleged. I can't say whether he did or he didn't. I can't really say what he was doing with all the money. I can say that I sent him an incredible amount of money. And one of the conversations that I had when I left was with Sky because I really didn't understand how much money it took to live in prison. And one of the so with Sky, the conversation was he would have me send like almost $200-300 for phones. And Sky was like, whoa. No. Like, nobody needs that much money for phone calls. Like, no one. Like, she's like, we can get by on, you know, like $40 to do a phone call every day, et cetera, et cetera. And like, you had broken down the math quite a bit. And that was like when I really realized that a lot of the money that I had sent him was not necessarily going to phone calls. I don't really know where it was going.
Can I interject real quick with regards to the phone calls? Okay, so just in case you're listening and you're considering your loved one spending a lot of money, first you have to consider what state he's incarcerated in and what phone service. Because there was a point where GTL had actually charged me $30 for a 20-minute call from Virginia to Colorado just to call my mom. So some states they're still expensive, very expensive. Other states they're not. So
Right. And
take
in
it
our
with a grain of salt
situation, it should not have been that expensive, but I really didn't know. I also paid for text messages. He loved to receive a box of goodies that he couldn't get at commissary. He liked commissary money. And, I just kind of sent it to him because I loved him. And there's so many needs that you can't meet because of the space that I felt like I needed to send him money to make up for that. And I don't think anyone should feel that way. Like now with Sky and Joey, we're all on a budget. I'm on a budget. Joey's on a budget. Sky's on a budget. We're all on a budget. And they know how much they're going to get every 2 weeks when I get paid. It's not very much. Joey and Sky each get $20 on a really good overtime payday. They might get 30. And at the holidays, I send them a bigger chunk so they can celebrate and buy things that they don't normally have. But we're all, if I'm going to be broke, we're all going to be broke together. Right. Joey got pie money this year, and Sky, I sent her money so she could do something. What she chose to do was buy a music package, which she doesn't normally have. So now I know, run the budget, and I understand that. The truth is, like, I need to come first. In my marriage, I did not put myself first. I put my ex-husband first. And his mother, my mother-in-law, who's a wonderful woman, told me her son is way too comfortable and he was getting way too much money and that I needed to cut him off because he was just allegedly getting a little out of control. And so I did. And after I cut him off financially, I would say our marriage tanked within a couple of months. So take that for what it is. It's all alleged, whatever. But it was hurting me because I was working so much to pay for all these things. And then I wasn't able to take care of myself. And I would only have like $20 and he'd be very comfortable. And I was very uncomfortable. And so it became a big problem. And so I don't think we can have this conversation, Joey, without having the conversation about the pen pals that are online looking for vulnerable women. In Maine, we call it running a game. I don't know what you call it in Colorado.
I don't know.
Is there not a name for it? Okay. In Maine, they call it they're running a game. And it's when they're finding vulnerable women. They have more than one woman that they're romancing. And they are doing it to get money from you, to live more comfortably. And you may be one of many women that they are doing this to. And this is a real thing. And I would be concerned if anyone is asking you for a lot of money. Joey never asked me for anything. I have to like force him to take my money. I'm like, Joey Bear, take my money and buy your pie. It took him 2 weeks to decide that he really wanted pie and to ask me very quietly, may I have pie money? Yes, you may have pie money. I think, many well-adjusted inmates, especially our lifers seem to understand money doesn't grow on trees like way better.
Well, I think for those that are, your loved one is incarcerated, at least for me, when it comes to money, yeah, of course money's nice. I would like to have a box completely full of commissary every week. But the problem is as a man, there's a certain sense inside you that you want to work for your own money. You want to be able to support yourself. You want to do these things. And so something like pie money, okay, that's an accessory. That's something. I like to know that I can wake up, get out and do stuff and hustle up enough money that I can support myself and have a living, where at any given time I've got plenty of soups in the box and everything like that. And so in my eyes, when you ask somebody for money, it's a humbling thing. And I would think most men, especially if it's your wife and you have kids and everything, to know that you might be taking out of those kids' mouth or anything like that, that is something that no man wants to do for somebody that he loves or his children or anybody, even a friend. So if anybody is asking for a substantial amount of money, for me, that's automatically a sign, and I usually see that individual, it's usually an addiction. There's usually drugs involved, and there's something going on other than just, because realistically...
And I think it's definitely a red flag. Like, let's put it out there. It's a red flag if an inmate is asking you for a lot of money all the time, or hitting you up every day, like for $10, $10. They need. The reality is that you get 3 meals a day and you have a bed. Okay, your basic needs are met. Not well, not great, not bougie, but you're not gonna starve to death. Where on the outside, like, I gotta pay my rent or I'm not gonna have a roof over my head. I gotta buy my groceries or I'm not gonna be eating. And so I do need to come first because those things aren't provided to me. So like I need to make sure my basic needs are met first. So like if somebody is taking all your money and you're like struggling to meet your basic needs, that's a problem. If they're asking for a lot of money, I would be concerned, like, where is it going? One of the things that I have a
Okay.
rule against is Cash App. I will not Cash App anyone because it's such a
Um,
concern for me.
okay. And for those who are getting Cash App, just so you know, Cash App may not necessarily be criminal activity. People in prison could be using Cash App to, like, in this case, I do a lot of charity and make little dolls for charity and things like that. But and at
Right, and we
the
use
time, if I
Cash App for
want to
that.
actually,
But if somebody is like, "Can you Cash App my friend $100 so I can get XYZ?" I'm like, "No, but I'll send you a money order for $100." And that's just me now. It's up to you. Like it's up to you, but like I've had to question it too many times where like now I'll just send you the money.
right.
Like and the
But at the
prison
same
can
time, for
know,
those
right?
people that at the same time, there people may be doing legitimate hustles that aren't illegal, criminal activity involving drugs, and they want to send their loved ones a Cash App and be like, so and so is going to Cash App you this money. Is it allowed in prison? You're not supposed to, no, but this is the way that you usually do your business in prison so that you can make a substantial living.
And so
And if you
again,
got
it
a loved
comes
one on
down
the street,
to you need to know your partner
yes,
and know you need to know your partner. Like, like I know that like you would never get me into anything illegal. I know Sky would never get me into anything illegal. And and that I don't have to worry about that. If you were like, "Can you Cash App my mom $30?" I'd be like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." But I think it comes down to like how well do you really know this person? And it can take years to really, really know a person because you don't know what they're doing behind the scenes. And so I think like I want people to trust people, but I also want people to be smart about it. Like be savvy
okay,
and really know your loved one and that level of trust and loyalty that you have because it is a big deal and you don't want to get wrapped up in something illegal. And having said that, if anyone to ask you to bring drugs into a prison, they do not love you. And so many vulnerable women get trapped in this place where they want you to bring drugs in. Don't do it. You're going to go to prison. You're going to get caught. Don't do it. Like, nobody that loves you is ever going to ask you to do something illegal.
okay. Let me ask you this. Um, so while incarcerated, there are happy times, there are bad times, there are sad times, there are hard times, everything like that. Same thing for those on the street. And when you have a loved one, explain to me or tell me about some of those times where it felt loving, like there was love in there, like what
Oh, yeah.
what
My ex-husband was definitely like he definitely loved me and he did a lot of loving things. Like when we decided to get married, he took money out of his trust, called a jeweler, had the prison cut them a check, had his case manager help him look at what they had available at the jewelry store, and he bought me and he researched diamonds for at the education center for weeks before he purchased this. So I had an actual engagement ring that he had bought, and he had got it at a pawn shop that was willing to work with the resident. And it was a very quality diamond. So even though it was smaller, I got so many compliments on it because it caught the light just right. And it was a very beautiful vintage ring. Um, and it was something that I loved because I love vintage stuff. So he knew I loved vintage
okay.
things and got me
Can
this
I
very vintage
can I
ring.
can I interject for 1 second?
Sure.
Um,
A ring is not
so
love, we
many
know.
no, well, this is on this topic, yes. So this is a typical stereotype that men have of women, where they're just going to be obsessed about the jewelry and everything. So this is not the case with her. She did love her ex-husband. Just let everybody know this. So for all you guys out there listening and everything, she's just a typical woman. Don't hold this against her, okay? All right, see.
Yeah. I love jewelry, but I thought it was a very sweet act that he went through all that research and all that trouble to do something special for me because he wanted me to have a ring. And that's really the
Can you
type
tell
of
us
guy
about
that
the marriage?
he would go out of his way, like on my sobriety dates, like he would send me flowers and he would do really sweet things. He
Can you
would
tell us
send me
about the wedding?
cards. He would send me beautiful letters. Um, he very helpful. I went through a lot. I lost a friend while we were married. He was very supportive during that. Um, we had good
Would you
times
like
and
to
we
tell us
had
about
really
your wedding?
bad times, but huh?
Would you like to tell us about your wedding? Tell us about how the wedding was.
Yeah, let's do the wedding real quick. And then what we'll do, Joey, is we'll do a part 2 and talk about how we actually got to the point where we could do the wedding.
Okay.
And the process that it took. So real quick, we got married during the pandemic. My cousin had officiated a wedding and I said, "Oh great, when I marry my ex, would you do mine?" And he said yes, thinking it would never happen. He did officiate our wedding at the prison, so we had a really cute ceremony. I had to wear a mask. We couldn't kiss during our wedding ceremony, and what I did for my mask was I covered it in lace and pearls. I had so many compliments. One, they hadn't seen an actual ceremony at the prison in 8 years. And so it was really like cool for the guards that got to watch this ceremony. They were really impressed. And everyone said, way to make the best out of it. Like I really went above and beyond to like just make the best out of my prison wedding and to make it fun and to dress up as nice as I could on a cold day within, all of the standards of the prison. And we had a really sweet ceremony and I got a lot of compliments on how well it was done. Because normally what they see is you go in, you sign the legal documents, and you're done. So for them to see an actual little ceremony was really, really cool.
Did he
And
wear a tux?
he wore his prison blues, his nice ones, as you
Nice.
do.
Fancy. High
Right? You
class.
wear your best clothes.
Yep.
Um,
Get the iron out.
he did want a very expensive ring. He knew exactly what he wanted. I did buy it for him. And I was worried because I didn't want him to have anything of real value while in the prison, but he said he could handle it and could protect it. I don't know if he still has it, or if it's been traded. I know I gave my ring back. It's at his mother's house when we got divorced, but we did have a really sweet ceremony and we were able to exchange rings. We also did a traditional hand fasting. The warden had never heard of such a thing and actually had to research what the ceremony was before he could approve it. And they actually paid for the hand fasting cord to make sure it was within prison guidelines. So I said, as long as it's green, that's cool. And they were the ones that bought the hand fasting cord. We had photos, but I did want one photo that wasn't prison. So there is a photo I'll try to insert it. It's just our hands with our wedding bands. And that was what was hanging on the wall for a really long time. I still have it. I love the photo. I think the inmate that took it did a really good job. And we're almost at 40 minutes. This is going super long. So Joey and I are going to wrap it up and we will do a part 2 because there's so much to this. We're not going to have enough time. So we thank you for listening for the first part. Good job interviewing Joey. And